Okay, so today I'm going to be reviewing this. This is one of my favorite pieces of bass gear, my VT Bass DI by Tech21. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the different knobs you got on here. So you got level, controlling the output, blend, controlling how much of the effective signal is blended in, low, middle, and high, obviously self-explanatory, that's an EQ. Character is an interesting one. It's kind of like the type of distortion you're getting. I don't know a whole lot about the physics of it, but I do believe it's kind of affecting what area of the frequency spectrum gets distorted. Long story short, character all the way down, you're gonna get a very muffly, tubey kind of distortion, and as you turn it up, you're gonna get more of that like really bitey, aggressive, like high-end distortion. Drive, just how much of that distortion you're getting. Then down here we got the Phantom Ground Connect, more on that feature later. The output, we got a 10 dB pad going up. You can boost the signal 10 dB to the quarter inch out, minus 20 dB XLR. So that just cut the output going out the XLR if you want that. Byte just kind of adds a little bit more high end to the signal. And then a speaker sim button, which I believe is an EQ based thing, but essentially kind of emulates the sound of a mic'd speaker. The next thing we got here is the inputs and outputs. On this side, you got an input and a parallel output. So that means you can plug it in here and have a separate out that's unaffected by the pedal, which I'll get to in a bit, very useful. The main out is over here. That's the out you want to send to your amp with the effective signal. An XLR out, which is super useful on stage. That's what makes this a DI box. You can plug XLR straight into the console and you can phantom power this pedal. Okay, so what do I use this for in my everyday life? So what I love this for, it's a secret weapon to get a consistent tone no matter what situation you're in. Let me explain that. If you're sharing, let's say, an amp with another band or a house cab or something, and you don't like the tone of it, you can take this, plug that into the effects loop of that amp, bypassing that amp's preamp and just going straight to the power amp and the speaker and get the tone you're familiar with through that speaker. Also, because it's a DI box, you can just skip an amp altogether. Let's say you're running in-ears or you have really good monitors, and you could use this solely, save the room in your car, don't bring an amp, run this straight into front of house, and even then, because it's got an extra output here and an extra parallel output here, you can run that to your in-ears unit and get a separate line to each super easily by splitting the signal through this guy. Because this is phantom powered, you could show up to gig with just this. You don't have to bring a power supply, you don't have to bring batteries, you don't have to bring anything. You can just power yourself off the front of house board with this and get a wonderful tone. So I've had this pedal for about 2 years after upgrading from the Boss BBX1. I've used this for like metal, country, jazz, indie. It's actually a pedal I originally hated when I first got it, but it slowly started to grow on me once I started to realize what it actually is. The biggest mistake I made though, straight out of the box, especially coming from like a Boss distortion pedal, is this isn't really a distortion pedal. Think of it more like a preamp. Think of this more like the amp settings on your amp and the tone you would get from that. So what this is really doing, it's really getting you that amp kind of sound in a box. It's kind of more similar to like the Aguilar Tonehammer, the Ampeg DI, or the Gallien-Kruger DI. It's really giving you the tone of their signature amp, but in a Stompbox version. Okay, so now I'm gonna run through a few quick demos showing off Ampeg SVT sort of sound. One kind of just showing the generic sound of this pedal. Another showing off that it actually kind of reacts to your dynamics in a nice way, kind of like how a tube amp does. And then I'll also do a quick little demo showing like a more like modern metal tone that you might want to get out of a pedal like this. some final little tips with this. So if you are running this into an amp, I was running all the demos just DI into my interface, but if you are running this into an amp, don't do what I call preamping too hard. This was a mistake I was making where I was running into my Mark-based amp, trying to really drive that preamp and also distort in this preamp. You're gonna get two distortions kind of fighting each other. Sometimes that's cool if you do it intentionally. Personally, I find let one of them do the heavy lifting, get you that tone, and then the other one just shape it a little bit more from there. Same in any pedal chain. You see this like with serial compression and stuff too. Let each one do a bit of the work. Don't try to like super crank the distortion on this, crank the distortion on that, and then wonder like, oh, why is my tone so muddy? Another thing going along with if you're putting this into an amp, there's a speaker sim button here. I love doing that when I'm running into front of house. It really warms up the sound, makes it a lot less clacky, gets rid of a lot of the downsides of playing DI, kind of a lot of the color you would get from a speaker. But if you activate the speaker sim going into another speaker, it's gonna get really muddy. You're gonna kind of get double the speaker tone if that makes sense. Anyways, avoid doing that. That's a mistake I made a lot straight off the bat as well. My last little tip here, you can see here I have it marked out. There's a nice big strip on the bottom here, so get yourself some painter's tape, just like any other pedal. Mark out your settings. That's another downside of this. It's not an Axe-Fx, it's not a Helix. It's not gonna remember your settings, so you gotta play it old school and write them down on the side of your pedal. Other than that, great unit. That's my experience with it. I use it all the time, live obviously, even in the studio. If I kind of want to burn a little bit of that like tubeness sound into my signal, I'll use this guy. Even sometimes running the parallel out, getting like a dirty signal, clean signal out of this guy is super useful in recording. Blend them together, get good tones that way. Anyways, I hope you liked my review of this pedal. Really great unit. If you got any use out of this, consider liking this video, show it to a friend, show it to anyone you know who's looking to expand their pedal board.